My unexpected discovery in my wife's bag nearly cost us our relationship when I caught them together. Linda, my wife of 10 years, was there to greet me when I got home from work on Wednesday evening. She asked me to sit at the table, saying we needed to have a serious talk. I thought to myself, here we go, another challenging discussion. As I settled into a chair, Linda began by affirming her love for me and her commitment to our marriage. Her reassurances made me uneasy. I responded with an unsure, okay, but before I could say more, she cut me off. Taking a deep breath, she continued, I love you and want us to grow old together, but I've decided I want to have an affair. I was stunned by this announcement and found it deeply troubling. I asked, so you love me, don't want to hurt our relationship, but still want to be with someone else? She clarified, I wouldn't phrase it exactly that way. I've met someone I want to have a physical relationship with. It would be occasional, and I promise to be honest about it. I believe my love for you is strong enough that it won't affect how I feel about you. If you truly love me, you should let me do this because it's something I need. With a confident smile, she explained her reasoning. Confused, I asked, I don't see how this wouldn't impact us, and have you already made plans with this person? Linda confirmed, we're tentatively planning a weekend trip next week. She then asked how I'd react if the roles were reversed. Knowing my honest response might upset her, I said I'd be okay with it as long as she assured me it wouldn't affect our relationship. She retorted, you know full well you'd have gone ballistic if I ever suggested this. I scoffed at her remark, and she was surprised, saying, I didn't expect you to react this way. I thought your love for me would make you accept this. I replied, whatever you're thinking must be unrealistic. Did you really believe I'd just give you the go-ahead for this affair? Am I supposed to sit idly by while you have a weekend with someone else? Maybe I didn't think it through well enough, she admitted. You're right, I didn't consider everything, including my own feelings. If I say no, will you still go through with it? I honestly don't know, she said. I never expected you to refuse. We clearly didn't think this through. Let's do this, give me a few days to reflect, and we'll sit down on Sunday to talk it over after I've had some time to think. Tonight caught me off guard. Feeling unsettled, I moved my belongings to the guest room. Linda asked what I was doing, and I explained that I didn't want to share a bed with her if she was more focused on someone else than on me. After entering the guest room, I closed the door with force. The night wasn't particularly restful, but I did devise a plan. It dawned on me that if she followed through with her intentions, our relationship would be irreparably damaged. The following day, I left for work as usual but didn't exchange a word with Linda. I called my workplace and explained that I needed the next 2 days for personal reasons. Then I went to work on my strategy. I purchased 3 voice-activated recorders, placing one near the phone, one in our bedroom, and one in her car. I even found a phone tap recorder to connect to our landlines. My next stop was the cell phone provider. Since my name was on her phone plan, I easily obtained a copy of her phone charges. Later, while she was still at work, I decided to snoop into her email accounts. I discovered one that I hadn't known about, but the password was a piece of cake. What I found there was quite revealing, at least I learned she hadn't been physically involved with him yet. I set up the account to forward any emails to me without leaving any traces. To cap off my day, I got my hands on a pair of discreet GPS locators. These little gadgets were easy to hide. I planned to slip one into her wallet, because she'd likely carry her cash and credit cards with her, and the other would find its place in her car. It had been a hectic day, but I'd set up everything to keep tabs on her. The only missing piece was getting access to her cell phone to check for messages. I hoped to do that later in the evening, along with planting the GPS devices. Upon checking her emails, I discovered that she had exchanged quite a few messages with a coworker named Frank Jones. Frank was the guy in the middle of all this, and I was ready to turn his world upside down just as he had done to mine. The emails confirmed that the upcoming weekend was a green light, regardless of what I had to say about it. That Friday, I made my way to a highly recommended divorce lawyer. I instructed him to start the divorce process with adultery as the cause, listing Frank Jones as the man I intended to sue. The lawyer assured me that it would be straightforward with proper evidence. I presented him with all the emails, phone records, and mentioned that I'd soon have audio tapes as well. He seemed pleased and committed to starting the proceedings immediately. When Linda returned home that evening, I gave her the cold shoulder and didn't utter a word as she prepared dinner. I left the house and headed to a bar to grab a meal and have a few beers. Upon my return, she tried to talk to me, but I simply walked past her, entered the guest room, and slammed the door shut. The only chance she had to salvage our marriage was by canceling her plans with Frank, but I wasn't optimistic about that happening. I continued to ignore her throughout the weekend until Sunday afternoon, when I decided it was time for a conversation. We both took seats in the kitchen, and I began by expressing my lack of enthusiasm about her request. I explained that I had thought it over extensively and couldn't find any way to be comfortable with it. I pointed out that, despite her claims that it wouldn't affect our marriage, it was evident that it was already causing harm. I noted her upset demeanor and suggested that if she had considered things from my perspective, she might have been more understanding. I mentioned my attempts to see it from her point of view, but I couldn't see any positive outcomes. Therefore, I had to decline her request. "How can you be so selfish if you love me?" she asked. "If anyone's selfish here, it seems to be you, wanting to be with someone else," I replied. "What if I go through with it anyway?" she challenged. "There will be serious consequences for any extramarital affair. We both made vows 10 years ago to be faithful." "I know, but this is something I have to do." "Well, I guess this discussion is over. You really need to think about this." I got up and left the house, taking my laptop to a nearby spot to keep an eye on their emails. She was furious and assured him that she was going no matter what. He told her that was great because he had already booked room 125 at the Hilton in Kansas City for Friday and Saturday nights. I immediately reserved that room for Thursday night. They were making this way too easy. They were also planning a romantic date on Saturday evening with dinner, dancing, and, well, closeness. Linda mentioned that she bought some new underwear just for their date. I grabbed a bite to eat while keeping an eye on their correspondence. They had moved past my refusal and were deep into making plans for their weekend. Check-in time was at 3 o'clock, so he was going to pick her up at 1 o'clock since it was a 2-hour drive and they wanted to be there as early as possible. I was surprised he was going to pick her up at the house. I needed to figure out what I wanted to do about that. I also reserved a room for the weekend, close enough to theirs to intercept all their signals. Over the next few days, I gathered all the necessary equipment, including a couple of small fiber optic HD video cameras. I plan to install them in the room on Thursday to be fully prepared to document their weekend escapades. This evidence would be perfect for my divorce case. I continued to ignore her the entire time, but Wednesday marked the day of reckoning for her. I decided to offer her one last chance. If she chose Frank, that would be the end for us. I asked her to join me at the table. For a moment, she didn't seem thrilled but complied. I initiated the conversation by asking if she had given it more thought. She confirmed that she had and expressed her intention to proceed with her plan. She mentioned her upcoming trip with Frank and expressed hope that we could move past this. I let out a sigh and cautioned her, telling her that this was her last chance to reconsider. I advised against jeopardizing our marriage for someone else and warned her of potential consequences if she went through with it. Despite my warning, she remained firm in her decision. I concluded by stating that she had chosen Frank over me, indicating the finality of her choice. I then left the room, closing the door forcefully as I usually did. It was clear that our marriage was over, and someone would have to face the consequences. Thursday morning, I went to work and requested the afternoon and the following day off to finalize my divorce plans with Linda. My boss was sympathetic and offered his support, allowing me the time I needed. I drove to Kansas City on Thursday, checked into their room, and set up all the surveillance devices, ensuring they were functioning properly. I wanted to gather all the evidence necessary for the divorce proceedings and then deal with them using my laptop. I verified that all the cameras were working and aimed correctly. I waited for them to turn off and then moved around to confirm they would activate. Everything seemed perfect. I walked down the hall past their room to ensure I had the necessary range for monitoring. Once again, it was within range. Upon returning home, I contemplated the end of my marriage. I had one more errand to run. I stopped at a gun store and bought a small can of pepper spray to disrupt their romantic date. When I got home, Linda was waiting in the kitchen, looking expectantly at me. I walked past her without a word and slammed my door once more. Linda came into my room, trying to be friendly, but I told her to save it for Frank because I didn't need any pity. I turned my back on her, and she left. I slept restlessly that night, but everything was ready to bring this to an end. On Friday morning, I got up, left at the usual time, and didn't utter a word to her. I went to the lawyer's office and signed the divorce papers. I informed them that I would have all the necessary evidence by Monday and requested that she be served with the papers at her workplace on Monday afternoon. I also asked them to serve papers to Frank at the same time, as I intended to sue him for alienation of affection. Checking Linda's GPS, it seemed she was at the hair salon. I entered the house and opened her suitcase, where I found her new underwear. They were undeniably alluring, though it was a shame she wasn't doing this for me. Wearing rubber gloves, I took out her new lingerie and sprayed the crotch of her panties and the cups of her bra with pepper spray before placing them back in the suitcase. This was going to be interesting. I went to our bank and closed all our joint accounts, transferring all the cash to a new account. I also canceled all the credit cards that bore both our names. With a satisfying morning's work behind me, I headed home to bid farewell to my wife. Around 12:30, I knew she would be preparing for her new man. As I entered the house, Linda was nowhere in sight, so I assumed she was upstairs getting ready. I went up to her room and walked in, finding her in some underwear I had gifted her in the past. She tried to cover herself, but I told her not to be silly since I had seen it all before. She looked stunning with her new hairstyle, flawless makeup, and enticing lingerie. I couldn't resist sharing my thoughts with her, mentioning that she looked amazing that day. I expressed my disappointment that she didn't put in such effort for me, to which she responded by explaining that she just wanted to feel good about herself that day. Continuing, I told her that she looked alluring but that I felt she was more concerned about what someone else thought than she had ever been about me. In response, she apologized, saying that she simply wanted to feel attractive. I let out a sigh and reminded her that she had always been attractive to me. I emphasized the depth of my love for her and believed that she had loved me as well. I then approached her and gently removed her rings from her left hand. I went on to explain that the ring I had given her on our wedding day held significant meaning for me, symbolizing our vows to forsake all others. I expressed my disappointment that it seemed to hold less meaning for her. I mentioned that I didn't want to see the ring I had given her on her finger while she was with another guy. I also noted that the engagement ring was my mother's and that I intended to keep it for sentimental reasons. I slipped both rings into my pocket, and she looked surprised but didn't argue. I won't be here when he arrives, but I don't want him coming into my house. You can't be with him here. If you do, I'll take serious action against him and make sure you won't be desirable to any man again. I promise you that he cannot set foot in my house. Do you get it? Yes, I won't let him in. That's good. I'll be keeping an eye on things. She asked, "Why are you acting like this?" I replied, "Because the love of my life just shattered that love. I hope this weekend is worth the consequences. Goodbye, Linda." I turned and walked away from my soon-to-be ex-wife. She yelled at me as I left, but I was done with her. I parked down the street, ensuring Linda could see me. If he entered the house, I'd risk jail, but they'd suffer more. Soon, his car pulled up. He walked to the door and rang the bell. Linda opened the door and came out with her suitcase. She set it down and embraced him, followed by a long, passionate kiss. As he picked up her suitcase, she glanced my way with a smug grin. She sat right beside him in the car and shot me another smug look as they drove past. I responded by flipping her off, wiping that smug look off her face. Upon returning home, I changed all the locks and the garage door code. I had already packed my suitcase, so I grabbed it and headed to KC. After checking in, I went to my room and set up my laptop. The camera, aimed at the foot of the bed, showed Linda making a move, indicating they'd already been intimate. It was quite evident that he hadn't lasted very long. When he emerged from the bathroom, he was completely naked. I couldn't help but laugh, seeing that he had a very small tool. Linda was used to much more than what this guy could deliver. About that time, Frank joined Linda on the bed, clearly ready for another round. She smiled at him and opened her arms. I couldn't help but laugh again when she reached for his tiny tool. He didn't have to hold back, because I'd be surprised if she could even feel that tiny thing inside her. Wow, did she make a terrible choice? This guy was absolutely pitiful. I could detect a hint of frustration on her face as he took a break. It seemed like she wasn't going to be too pleased with the outcome of this weekend. She'd return home for a date and then get kicked out the next day. He was soon ready for another round and provided her with yet another underwhelming 4-minute session. He had finished 3 times already, and she wasn't even close. This was turning out better than I'd ever hoped. I had to stop watching and went out for dinner and a couple of drinks. I left everything recording to gather all the evidence I might need for the lawyer and to make it abundantly clear to her what a poor choice she had made. When I returned, he was fast asleep, and she appeared even more frustrated. This was actually quite enjoyable. Once I got over the pain of losing my wife, I went to bed thinking about how much fun I was going to have messing with him tomorrow. I considered some of the attractive women I'd seen at the bar and knew I'd soon be free to pursue them. I drifted off to sleep with a contented smile on my face. There was no more anguish for me, my path was set, and I knew where I was headed. I woke up feeling refreshed and ready for some fun. After a shower, I went out for a nice breakfast and picked up some snacks, just in case I couldn't get away later. Returning to my room, I called a local florist. I ordered a bouquet for Linda, just like the ones I used to give her on our anniversary. Since there wouldn't be another anniversary, I wanted her to reflect on what she was jeopardizing. I requested it be delivered at 11 a.m. My timing might have been good, but it didn't really matter. The timing turned out to be perfect. They left the room for a while, and upon returning, resumed their romantic activities. They were soon without clothes, and he had just begun when there was a knock at the door. The florist delivered the flowers, and I could see a template of expression on Linda's face before it quickly turned to anger. She grabbed her cell phone and dialed a number. My cell phone started ringing, and I answered it, leading to a brief conversation. "Hello, how are you?" "Not great. My wife is out with some other guy while I'm here getting angrier by the minute." "Why do you even care?" "Well, I received a bouquet of flowers just like the ones you always get me for our anniversary. I was curious about what you were up to." "I don't know how you could think I did that. Firstly, you and your genius boyfriend kept me in the dark about where you were going. Secondly, if I had sent you flowers, they would have been ragweed, and the card would have read, 'To my cheating wife.' Not very nice, right? But then again, neither is your little escapade with Frankie. Maybe those flowers will give you some idea of what you're throwing away." I noticed a shocked look on her face as I turned off my phone. She immediately tried calling again, but naturally, I didn't answer. She attempted a few more times but eventually gave up. She told Frankie about what I had said, and he reassured her that I would eventually get over it. However, that wasn't going to happen until I was rid of her. She wasn't initially in the mood for closeness, but after a while, she began to give in. So I decided to order a pizza delivery and got Linda's favorite pizza. The pizza arrived just as Frankie was getting back into the action. He was pretty upset and didn't want to pay, but the delivery guy confirmed the room number and his cell phone number. He even threatened to call the police, so Frankie reluctantly paid up. Since they had paid for it, they decided to eat their lunch. After enjoying their meal, they chatted for a while, but Frankie's hormones got the better of him, and he was after her again. Just as things were heating up, I called a sandwich shop and ordered her favorite sandwich for delivery. About a minute into their intimate time, the sandwich arrived. When Linda saw the sandwich, she concluded that I must have figured out their location. Frankie couldn't believe it, but she spilled the beans about my sarcastic remark, claiming I probably hacked into her new email where he had mentioned it. It took her a while, but she eventually put two and two together. She said I was pretty close and wouldn't have had much trouble doing that. They decided to get dressed and go out for a while with the plan to return, freshen up, and get ready for their romantic date later. She assured him she'd make it up to him tonight. As they left, I couldn't stop laughing. Tears were rolling down my face. When they got back, they showered, got dressed, and Linda put on some lingerie, giving him a little show. He tried to make a move, but she insisted on going out for their date. I wondered how long it would take for my little surprise to kick in. She finished getting dressed, looking great. I hoped my plan would work because it was going to be quite the spectacle if it did. Off they went, and I settled in eagerly awaiting their return. About an hour later, they were back, and Linda dashed into the bathroom and hopped into the shower. She stayed in there for quite a while, and when she emerged, her breasts and crotch were bright red. They looked painful, and it appeared that little Frankie wasn't getting any action tonight either. Linda was lying on the bed, groaning. When Frankie tried to get frisky, she went off on him, explaining that she was in pain and not interested right now. She chalked it up to some sort of allergic reaction to her new lingerie. Little did she know, I spent some time organizing all my videos and making DVDs for my lawyer and Frankie's wife. Once everything was ready, I called it a night. It had been a highly successful day, and I couldn't help but smile. Trouble was brewing in paradise, and I was the cause of it. Sunday morning, I got up and headed back home. Linda was in for a world of trouble when she returned, but tomorrow it would all be over. When Frankie dropped her off later that day, he didn't even bother walking her to the door. He just let her out. I was sitting on the couch, engrossed in a football game, and didn't even acknowledge her arrival. She announced that she was home, and I barely reacted. She walked right in front of the TV, flashing me a sultry smile, and mentioned that she thought I might be happy to see her, considering she was not deceased. I responded by questioning, "What gave you that impression? Do you believe I've suddenly become foolish?" She replied, explaining that she didn't think I was foolish, but rather believed that my love for her was strong enough to move past the situation. I retorted, "I did love you wholeheartedly, but that changed after you left with someone else." Despite my pleas, I poured my emotions out to you, only for it to mean nothing. I stopped caring whether you would return or not once you left with him. She appeared shocked by my feelings and commented that she couldn't believe I felt that way about her. I replied firmly, "Yes, it is indeed the case. You've made a significant mistake." She then inquired if there was any chance for us moving forward, promising to do anything to make things right. I responded with a sarcastic remark, "You could drop down on your knees and apologize." She protested, stating, "I can't do that." I sighed and acknowledged, "I knew you wouldn't, which only reinforces my doubts about the worth of your promises to save our marriage, much like your promise of fidelity when we got married." She said she had been thinking about me all day and wanted to make love that night. I replied coldly, "You need me? I don't think so. Making love tonight is not likely. Did you have little Frankie use protection every time you were with him?" She said no, explaining, "He's married, and I can't have children." I continued, "Do you think you're the only one he's been raw with? You're damaged goods now as far as I'm concerned. I won't touch you until you get a clean bill of health from a doctor. Plus, I don't do seconds. I know he's clean, but you can use protection if you don't trust it." She snapped back, "Right. I'm going to use a rubber to sleep with my wife after she spent the weekend with some loser barebacking guy? Screw you. You chose little Frankie over me. I'm going out for a while. I can't stand looking at your cheating ass. Tonight, you can sleep in the guest room. I prefer the master bedroom. Unlike you, I didn't do anything wrong." She replied firmly, "We can talk about this tomorrow when you get back from work." I'm not sure what else there is to discuss. I left the house and headed to a nearby bar and grill to grab some dinner and clear my head. Well, my head was already clear as I knew exactly what I was doing. I just needed some distance from her. I'm not much of a drinker, so I opted for a meal and took a long walk. When I returned home, she was in my bed. I gave her a stern look and told her to get out. She argued, saying, "This is our bed. I have just as much right to be here as you do." I retorted, "The hell you do. You gave up that right when you got involved with little Frankie. So either get out of my bed, or I'll haul your stuff out of here and toss you onto the street." She started crying and slowly left the room, and I made sure to close and lock the door behind her. Her tears were still audible as she walked down the hallway. The next morning, I completely ignored her. We each had breakfast, and she left at her usual time. As she turned to leave, she told me that she loved me. I gave her a cold, scornful look and replied that I had loved her too, making it clear that it was in the past tense. I could see tears welling up as she turned and walked away. Once she was gone, I began packing her belongings into garbage bags. Then I reached out to Frankie's wife. I asked her if she knew that her husband had spent the weekend with my wife. She believed he had been away on a business trip, so I offered to provide her with copies of my evidence. She was very eager about the idea. I was taken aback when she opened the door. She was absolutely stunning. I stammered and had to apologize to her, blaming my initial shock on her beauty, which was entirely truthful. We got down to business, and I explained what had transpired over the weekend. Linda was furious, and we decided that she would accompany me to the lawyer's office to see if he would take her case. The lawyer agreed to represent her and even offered us a discount. Linda began filling out the necessary paperwork while I spoke with the attorney. I asked him if I needed to wait to serve Frankie to protect Linda, and he assured me that as long as she signed the papers beforehand, she would be okay. Linda and I went out for lunch while they got her divorce papers ready. After she signed them, I dropped her off at home and headed back, waiting for Linda to call me. I was supposed to call her that night to update her on how things went. My phone rang around 3, and she sounded pretty upset. She said, "What the hell is this? I just got served with divorce papers, and Frank received some papers about being sued for something." I replied, "Well, it all seems pretty straightforward to me. I warned you that there would be consequences for your weekend. Seems like you didn't take me seriously. I didn't think you'd actually go through with this." She retorted. I shot back, "Maybe you should have listened to me instead of falling for all the nonsense little Frankie was feeding you. Let's not discuss this over the phone. We can talk when you get back to my place." Then I hung up. I took her stuff, put it in garbage bags, and tossed them into the front yard. Knowing I was recording this confrontation, I thought it would be useful for getting a restraining order against her if needed. When she pulled into the driveway and saw her belongings strewn about, she flew into a fit of rage. She was screaming incoherently, and spit was flying from her mouth as she unleashed her anger. I remained calm as she vented and eventually broke in to begin our final conversation. "If you want to talk, you need to settle down so we can have a civilized conversation. If not, I'll pack your things in your car, and you can leave." She sobbed, "I never thought you would do this to me." I responded firmly, "Do this to you? You foolish woman, you did this to us. I told you numerous times not to do it and even pleaded with you not to destroy our marriage, but you chose to do just that. So why would you think I wouldn't file for divorce? You said you loved me." She whimpered, "I did love you more than anything, but you shattered my heart in return. The problem is that you didn't love or respect me. I can't live with someone who has such a low opinion of me, even though I still have feelings for you." She asked, "Why do you keep calling him little Frankie?" I explained, "I had video cameras set up in your room and recorded everything that happened over the weekend. You can see why I call him little. The first time I saw his underwhelming package, it was so laughable that I couldn't help but cry from laughter. I even wondered if you could actually feel anything with that. I also noticed that you weren't enjoying yourself as much as you do when we have closeness." She replied, "We truly made love, and I'll probably miss that." I offered a different perspective. "Look at it this way, now you have the freedom to be with anyone you want. You can have a new partner every night." She shook her head and said, "I don't want that. I want you, only you." I suggested, "Let's go inside and have a seat for a few minutes. I'm sorry for my harsh words, I'm just dealing with a lot of anger right now. But please understand, I would never physically harm anyone." The same can't be said for little Frankie. We went inside and sat down at the kitchen table, just like we had so many times before. It hit me hard when I realized that this would be the last time we sat together like this. She asked, "You wouldn't actually hurt Frank, would you?" I responded firmly, "Why not? He destroyed our once happy marriage. I think he should pay, even beyond the lawsuit and his divorce. He won't be getting a divorce, by the way," I added. His wife understood our situation and agreed to allow him to do it. She expressed doubt, "You really believe that, or is it just a trick to make me look bad so he can be with you?" I told her, "I talked to his wife this morning and shared my evidence with her, but he told her he was away on a business trip. Now they're sharing a lawyer, and we even got a discount." She reflected, "I wish you had been honest when I asked you how you'd react if I wanted to be with another man. You know you would have gone crazy." I argued, "I don't think you believe me even now, and that's one of the reasons we're getting a divorce. But honestly, I don't care what you believe. When you call him later, you'll find out that he's also been shown the door." "So you're really kicking me out?" she asked. "Yes, I am. The night you revealed your plan, I went into the guest room to think. Within an hour, I knew I wanted a divorce. On Thursday, I bought the equipment I needed to gather evidence and hack into your email account. Then, on Friday, I visited the lawyer and began the divorce process." She said, "Why didn't you give me a heads up about your plans to divorce me? I might have reconsidered. Is there any chance you could forgive me, Linda? I loved you so much that forgiveness might have been possible, but last night was your last chance, and you let it slip away. I think I could potentially forgive you, but I could never trust you again. I'd live every day wondering when you'd want to be with someone else, and I can't live like that. It's better if we just end it now." She couldn't hold back her tears. I continued, "Unlike you, I've put a lot of thought into this, but every time I reach the same conclusion, I'm going to divorce you, and I'm going to make little Frankie pay for destroying my marriage. You can give him a call before you leave if you want to share a place or whatever. Just don't try to use your credit cards, I've canceled them all. I've left half of the money in our checking account for you, but I've removed my name from it. I'll split our savings with you. You can keep your car, but you'll need to handle the payments. You can take all your clothes and personal items once you find a place to live. You can have as much furniture as you need, but the house is mine. If I decide to sell it, I'll split the proceeds with you. It's all laid out in the divorce papers. If you choose to contest it, I'll use all the evidence I have, and it won't end well for you. I don't want to go down that road, but I will if necessary." She replied, "I won't fight it. This is all my fault. I just wish I could undo it." I lightened the mood. "Well, do you know the difference between a cheating wife and a light bulb?" Confused, she asked, "No, what's the difference?" I replied, "You can't have a romantic relationship with a light bulb." She didn't find it amusing at all. She answered, "I'm not going to argue. This is all on me. I just wish I could turn back time." To lighten the mood, I joked, "Do you know what separates a cheating wife from a light bulb?" She looked puzzled and asked, "No, what's the difference?" I said, "You can't have a romantic relationship with a light bulb." Her reaction was less than amused. I told her it was time for her to go and showed her out of the house. While she watched tearfully, I packed her belongings into her car. Once everything was loaded, I opened her car door and handed her a final item, her wedding ring, which I had flattened with a hammer. I told her it was now just scrap gold she could sell for some cash. After closing the car door, I leaned in and kissed her forehead, saying, "Goodbye, my love." I then turned and walked back to my empty house. I couldn't even watch her drive away, my eyes were clouded with tears, and I cried for another hour until I felt emotionally spent. Now I faced my choices. I could either drown my sorrows in alcohol, though I hardly drank and disliked the aftermath, so that wasn't an option. I could end my life, but I refused to give her the satisfaction of that outcome. Alternatively, I could hold my head high, knowing I had done nothing wrong, and move forward. The absence of Linda was a small comfort, bringing a faint smile to my face. Straightening up, still smiling, I dialed Linda's number. We made plans for dinner that night, and I felt like I was on the road to recovery. I called her again to confirm, and as we set up the evening, I realized I was moving toward healing. Maybe we'd stay friends, or perhaps I'd meet someone new, but her image still lingered in my mind.